Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. On the show this week, we've got Sophie Guibaud.
I'm Sophie Guibaud. I'm Chief Growth Officer at OpenPayd.
Sharing her story on spending the last 10 years designing and executing the go-to-market of banking as a service and embedded finance propositions in Europe, building teams and operations from scratch, and effectively integrating financial services into customers' existing products to create new revenue streams. We also talk through her lessons learned at each step on her entrepreneurial journey, the benefits of all of her extracurricular activities with podcasts and advisory boards giving her some creative headspace, and a few other nuggets on Sophie's own modus operandi. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. So Sophie, listen, given that we've known each other for a few years, let's just jump right into it, right? But I want to come back to your backstory in a minute because it's obviously quite important to who you are. But just to get started, tell me, in your words, what is embedded finance and why is it important?
So embedded finance is really giving the ability to companies to provide financial services to their customers at the point of use or point of context. And it's so important because essentially people don't want to go to their bank or even their app to do finances. They want to access loans wherever they need it. And this is what embedded finance does. It's enabling you to consume payments, loans, international transfers, wherever you need it, when you need it, essentially.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I like the way that you kind of position it. And I was thinking about this is that it is beyond fintech. And obviously you have your beyond fintech channel, and that I've thought that the word fintech will eventually go away and that it just becomes finance again, right? And that if you are embedding finance, you kind of put fintech under the covers and that it's just embedded. And I think embedded finance is that first step, perhaps of the term fintech, evolving in our lexicon, right?
I see fintech as an enabler of embedded finance. I fully agree with you, and I have never thought of it so far, like by creating beyond fintech.
Yep.
But indeed, like what I wanted to say with using the term beyond fintech is that essentially everything will be fintech in the future. So indeed, like the term fintech is redundant. It's where I fully agree with you that we can go back to finance. But the reality at the moment is that it's fintech players that are essentially enablers of embedded finance,
Absolutely.
of people that have no clue about financial
Absolutely.
services.
Absolutely. And, I think it's a long-term arc we're talking about here of, a good 10 years before we're at that point. But looking back through your career, after you finished at the university at HEC Montreal, what was it that you learned as an M&A analyst at Messier Maris, right? And I'm thinking about the name of that firm when I saw that on your LinkedIn profile. You've got Marc Messier, who was a famous hockey player in the 80s and 90s, ice hockey player in America, and Maris, Roger Maris, who was a famous baseball player in the U.S. for the New York Yankees in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, right? So the connection right there, Sophie, right away, which is awesome.
No, I should tell them that because actually Messier is Jean-Marie Messier is like the youngest partner at Lazare and also a French cabinet minister.
Awesome.
So, but I never made a relation with sports
leave it
player.
to me to tell you that. Okay. So what is it that you think you learned as an M&A analyst at Messier Maris, then as an acquisition finance manager at KBC, and finally, then as a TMT investment associate at Time Equity Partners, that prepped you to take that leap into HelloFresh about 10 years ago, which, looking back through your profile, I kind of point as your entry point into entrepreneurial ventures, yeah?
It's absolutely that. I think what I learned in those 3 experiences is really my love for startups, because I always thought I would do finance. I was really passionate about like numbers, and I always saw myself as basically doing wealth management and enabling people to basically make the best of their money for the future and for their family. And I did an internship into that, realized that it was not quite my profile, because it was also a lot of advising to sell things to people that didn't understand what they were buying. So it's not really my personality. And I ended up like doing M&A, and while doing M&A, I was basically fundraising for startups and investing the money of the partners of Messier Maris into startups. So definitely it has been the beginning of my love for startups. And it's there that I really told myself, okay, I don't want to stay in M&A. I want to learn how to invest in companies, assess them. And this is why I went in acquisition finance and ultimately became an investor in startups. And at this point, so when I was an investor in startup, what I really realized is that I really enjoyed helping the entrepreneurs working on their strategies, but the truth is that I was not part of it. I could assess it, I could help, but I was not a part of it. And this is really the point where I just realized that I wanted to go into startups and
That's
do that.
pretty cool, because I had my very first experience in startup land where I thought I was going in to help them with strategy and team building. And it ended up being, okay, this business needs money. And within the first month, just figuring out, okay, you're going to be bankrupt in 6 weeks. So we better get you some money. So let's shift all gears into that. It's really cool that you had that similar experience as well, where M&A analyst doesn't sound like you're actually raising money for startups, but that's what it comes down to, right? Because that's the lifeblood.
It can be that. It can be an element. And of course, I have done also some mergers and acquisitions actually for very large company with them. But my love was definitely for the startup
That's pretty
side.
cool. Now, your entry point with HelloFresh, can you tell us about the key learning in converting that 1 year experience at HelloFresh into an entry point for Bankables?
Yeah, so I would like to tell you something that is not on my LinkedIn actually.
Okay,
before.
Please do.
It is basically like, so when I left my investment fund, I just didn't know how to join a startup. It was in 2011. Making the transition between finance and startup was, like, I would say, not as easy as it could be right now. And so essentially, I actually met a friend of a friend. I showed her around Paris. She was American. And she told me, look, I have a room in Silicon Valley. Come and explore. You say you want to go into startups. You don't know how to do. You have a room. And so 1 week later, I just took my plane and left. My parents thought I was just really nuts at this point.
Wow.
And I was just like, yeah, but how do I meet people? And so that's probably the craziest part. So I'm a tech person, but I'm not a tech person. Like I sell tech, but I'm really like not editing videos and stuff like that. But I was just like, the way to do that is to say that I come from Europe and that I want to explore what makes Silicon Valley so special. And so I went to buy a camera because at this point we couldn't do like videos with our phones because it was not that good. And I reached out to, I think, like 50, 60 people and I interviewed them.
Wow.
So I went to their offices. I met with someone at PayPal. I met with Ben Parr. I met with 500 startups. I met with like really so many people in the ecosystem and did all those videos and put it on a blog. And that's what got me my job at HelloFresh, essentially. Wow. It's because I showed I could do business development like pretty intensely. It was really, really intense. And HelloFresh, so the company didn't exist at all at that time. I was one part of the funding team, let's say. And they just saw what I had done in 1 month in Silicon Valley. And they were just like, that's great. So that's how I came about HelloFresh.
Okay, awesome. That's a way to do it. You just got to immerse yourself and get right into it. So that first year at HelloFresh, how did that go? And then how did that then develop into the entry point into Bankable?
Yeah, so it was a fantastic experience. The reason why I have decided to join HelloFresh over other companies is because actually I wanted to see the Rocket Internet recipe.
Okay.
Because I had seen it on an investor side. We actually co-invested with a fund of Rocket Internet on a few startups, and I really just wanted to know what made them so special. And I loved the HelloFresh proposition. So what I learned there really is to get things done, even stronger than my blog in Silicon Valley, because I joined on day 0 or day 1. We were 3 people, and in 10 days, we had built the proposition, the website, found the chef, done the recipe, and got our first 10 customers, which were not friends. And we did that 10 days. And that's how Rocket Internet does it, right? Like it's really intense, but essentially like you learn to do stuff you have never done. And I had never done that, I was propulsed being in charge of marketing. So not in the first 10 days. In the first 10 days, I was really in getting things done. But after that, I had to go and buy marketing for dummies, really, because I had 6 years in finance. I had never done marketing. And so what my key learning is really to go fast, to not get things right, but just get it done. And the second part is really play with the uncomfortable and do stuff you have never done and learn on the job and not push back, just think you will figure out a way to do it. And it's what I did, because I basically brought HelloFresh from nothing to a national rollout, opening all marketing channels, which are still the marketing channels that they use, still the most successful one when I see what they are doing.
Awesome. It's a really good point that you say that if someone asks you to do something when you're working for a startup, it can't be, hey, I'm not qualified for that. It needs to be, okay, let's just figure it out, right? If within ethical boundaries, obviously. But if you're in corporate and you say, well, actually, I don't really want to work on that program. It's something that I don't think that's fit for me. Then they find something else for you to do, right? You can't get away with that. And then tell us about your entry point into Bankable from there at the very beginnings of the early days of banking as a service, or at least your mindset around banking as a service. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, I was for a year at HelloFresh, and it's just e-commerce was interesting, but I was missing something. I was missing something from my days as an investor, which was the diversity of the business model, their complexity, and to feed myself with new things. And I didn't feel that e-commerce was really able to provide that. So I left and I was looking for my next steps. And at this point, my mentor, which I met during my KBC days, that has been following me for the past 15 years already, told me, look, I have invested in startups. They need help. Can you go and meet with them? And I met with them. At this point, this company was called Card Prepaid and was selling prepaid cards for corporates to do expense management. And basically, they offered me a contract. Okay. And at this point, I was just like, okay, I get bored very easily. So I just wanted to be a fixed term contract. Let's see later. And they were like, but we really would like you to be not a fixed term. But I was like, no, it's going to be fixed term, because I just want to make sure that I don't overcommit and that I really fall passionate about it. And this is what happened, really. Like after 6 months, it was a no-brainer. I just fell in love with fintech, with its complexity, with understanding like the different stakeholders. And I mean, it's a whole new world of things that came in front of me. And I definitely learned on the job again, because I was the second person in London. I built my team. I was in charge of sales and product strategy, and essentially like creating propositions with what we had and pitching it to some people that didn't know they needed it or wanted it. And it was like the whole beginning of neobanks, essentially. And neobanks basically needed banking as a service players. And this is how I have worked with the teams to reposition our offering from prepaid cards to an API platform, enabling others to launch financial services propositions. And it's at this point that, based on, I believe, maybe Chris Skinner at that time, because now I see that his term banking as a service, he started using it definitely before we did. But I was just like, it's what we're doing, banking as a service. And so for years, Bankable was in the top results when you are putting banking as a service, because we took the term so early on that it was a no-brainer for Google.
Absolutely. That was around 2014, 2015, wasn't it?
14, yes. 15, I joined
early days, because that was my entry point into all of this, was around 2014. And wow, okay. And then what was your thinking around, okay, there's a new opportunity here with Fedor, and that's where you and I met a few years back.
Exactly. So the truth is that so you can do banking as a service in plenty different ways. You can do it basically with a license and without a license. I believed it was important to operate under licenses and not be the tech platform only. And this is what I wanted to explore. And that's the reason why I essentially joined Fidor, because I wanted to explore what it was to be under a regulated entity, what added value you could bring to customers. And so at this point, essentially, Fidor was very much in the early days. I was looking at what they were doing in banking as a service. And at the same time, they were expanding internationally. So when we started discussing, they were like, okay, banking as a service, we have launched, but we are not quite there yet in structuring the operations. However, we very much would like you to launch the bank in the UK. And when we were talking about stretch and not having done things in the past, I can tell you that was the scariest moment of my life, like of my whole career, because when I signed the contract, I was like, I'm going to launch a bank in the UK, like by myself. Of course, there was a team, but I was the team leader. And I had never operated in a regulated environment. I, of course, kind of knew around FCA and the stakeholder of the industry, but I had never operated compliance function and things like that, essentially.
I hear you. What do you think your key learning was at your time at Fidor? Obviously, a huge opportunity to learn by going through the process of getting a banking license. But if you go a little bit more to the macro level, what do you think your key learning was there?
So much, to be honest, because I have had so many jobs at Fidor, because I launched the UK, obviously. It was actually not an acquisition of banking license. It was through passporting at this point, but it was already so I learned to launch a fintech B2C proposition. I had done it for HelloFresh in the e-commerce industry, but I was back to my early days of launching B2C propositions. I learned working in a matrix environment because I had only worked with small companies. And at this point, I was launching the first international subsidiary of Fidor and taking resources from Germany. And at this point, there was only 100 people at Fidor, and a lot of the official communication language was German, and I didn't speak a word of German. So there was all this thing of learning to set up an international subsidiary by myself in an international context in a language which is kind of not mine. It has worked very well, and everybody was really welcoming, but it's just the sheer complexity of doing that was a new level for me in my learning curve. And after that, two key learnings. So I worked on the European expansion at Fidor. I also worked on the restructuring of the SME proposition, which were great exercises in themselves, creating the playbook to launch the bank across Europe. But I think the biggest stretch was to operate after being acquired by BPCE. So becoming a part of a much larger group of company with all this complexity of stakeholders, of decision-making process, of having a strategy being adopted by different layers of companies that don't have the same objectives, or not all of them. So I think that was one of them. The second one was definitely when I moved to the banking as a service part, to learn how to sell the biggest contract of my life. And I think it's going to still be the biggest contract of my life in the future, because we were selling total contract values in the tens of millions. And my biggest contract was the 100 of million. And I was sourcing those contracts supported by an amazing team of people in Dubai. I was always still in the matrix concept, but sourcing those contracts and having little Fidor selling into those large organizations and commits that type of money because they wanted to launch neobanks. So it's what it takes to launch neobanks, right? To operate so many operations. And when you already have an installed audience that basically will keep on growing. So when I talk about that type of big contract, it's because there were millions of customers behind.
Yeah, there's something to be said about building a community and then monetizing that. So getting into the entrepreneurial world through HelloFresh, and then moving that entrepreneurial experience back into a context that you were passionate about in the financial services space, or more passionate about with Bankable, and then expanding that to a much wider level with Fedor. You then said, okay, I'm going to move on. What was the point where you said, I'm doing that and I'm going to move on to OpenPayd? And we'll get into OpenPayd in a minute.
Yeah. So I had been at Fedor for a long time, right? I spent 5 years there. I felt I was a bit at the end of my story there. We were going through a second acquisition. And it was the point where I just thought I would be more useful somewhere else than waiting for the second acquisition to happen. However positive it was for Fedor. It's like very positive, the move of the purchase by Sopra banking group, essentially. And so OpenPayd approached me. And what I really liked was they were so close to the vision I had for banking as a service moving forward and embedded finance. Embedded finance was not such a word at this point, but I can tell you that I have been talking about it since bankable already, like giving the ability to non-financial companies to provide financial services to customers is definitely what we're heading to. We don't need banks as front end, and we need banks to help operate financial services and do what they do greatly. And I have always been an advocate for all banks to go into banking as a service.
I bet. Absolutely.
So that was my vision of the future. And what I really like with OpenPayd is really this approach with multi-geography, like licenses across the globe, with licenses in the UK, in Malta, in Belgium, in Turkey, in the US, in Canada. So really the ability to supporting customers across borders, really. And there was, the fact that the tech was really good. And I can tell you that like our customers still tell us like we have one of the best platforms that exists, because the way it has been built is so flexible. It's in the cloud. You can play on the same day in the sandbox and you can be live. What takes more time is your onboarding, because we are onboarding financial institutions, which is always a bit a more complex process than would be a simple KYC or KYB. But the tech itself, you can get your account kind of the same day on front end, and if you integrate, up to you. It's like literally between 1 week and 1 month, really, even for the most complex workflows when you provide financial services to your end customers. So I really like that. And the last point was the ecosystem play. So having plenty partners to support our customers across geographies, across business models, and across product segments. So what we have worked on over the past year is really to move the platform from just account FX payouts to actually take the pay-in now. So we are supporting card processing through our own payment gateway, but a partnership with checkout.com. And we are doing the same with open banking. And essentially, it has come from the customers. It was a feeling I had on the market that we would end up with like this aggregation of services from pay-in to payout. But what we have realized by talking to customers is that essentially they want one single point of integration, one aggregator to manage with one contract, one API, but all the services behind. And the benefit that we have is that, okay, you can say, yeah, but the risk is quite high on one single organization, but we have plenty different partners behind. So like essentially if something was happening overnight to OpenPayd, they could still use the services below. So
Okay, I get it. That makes a good point and helps me expand this out a bit. But going to kind of the macro level, can you tell us the core proposition of OpenPayd and how you embrace the vision of the business in your day-to-day role?
So the core proposition of OpenPayd is really to enable organizations to use and offer financial services to their customers easily in a regulated and compliant manner and in a scalable way. The second layer is that we cater to complex organizations in the sense that we serve financial institutions with which typically are complex organizations for banks to serve directly because of the business model, because of the extra compliance required. So that's one part. And the second part is to enable organizations that are unregulated to use our services and our licenses to serve their customers. So we are really trying to add as much value as possible beyond the licenses, the tech, and the ecosystem of partners with essentially the knowledge to our customers.
Okay, I get it. And given your background and given how much detail of this business that you've been into, like you said, coming at it from not being a tech person, right? And that you truly understand the problem to solve, you truly understand, obviously, and embrace the value proposition of OpenPayd in your role there. It makes a lot of sense. Like you said, taking it back to the macro level, well, your day-to-day conversations that you're having with customers are about solving their problems, right? And those problems are not at the macro level. Those problems are at the micro level, right? So I get it. Just to kind of give us an example in the ethos of embedded finance, can you just give an example of OpenPayd integrating financial services into your customers' existing products to create new revenue streams?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a topic we love. So essentially, a couple years ago, crypto exchanges were not doing fiat at all. So they were like basically expecting you to come with your Bitcoin, top it up on their wallet, then exchange, then go out, right? They just didn't want to touch the fiat world because of the regulations around it. Now the market has evolved, and of course, crypto is becoming mainstream, and crypto exchanges want it to become mainstream. And to become mainstream, you need to make it easy for any users to buy crypto, not only people that know where to buy Bitcoin to then top up with your wallet, to make the exchange and then do whatsoever with it. And so essentially, it started with customers coming to us asking for card processing, essentially like the ability to take card payments. And very fast, it has become to asking for their customers to be able to purchase crypto by making a bank transfer. And so what we have designed is really the ability for crypto exchanges to have a master account and then individual virtual IBANs for their customers to top up their own wallets, which means that that's their own virtual IBANs. So that's very easy in terms of reconciliation. Like there is many less mistakes because there don't need to be a reference to top things up. And essentially, they top up their wallet, they make their exchange, and then they can send back the money directly to fiat accounts, whatever it is, HSBC, etc., if they want to. And we have developed a specific set of APIs that really enable to do that. So to basically simplify the reconciliation, but also only enable the customers to send back the money to their own accounts. And it really just simplifies the life of everybody in terms of money laundering controls as well as security. Because if you can only send back the money to the account you came from, like it's just a real comfort. And we have co-developed that with the platforms that we are working with. Now, 6 months later, everybody got excited with payment initiation and open banking. And it's something that we are currently finalizing the implementation of. But as you see, we started from like no fiat to full on like a payment flow with FX, with like accounts and open banking and card processing and things like that. And I expect that to happen not only in the crypto world, but we have seen Shopify do it. And now 50% of their revenue come from financial services, and a lot of platforms have a big interest in providing financial services to their customers at the point of use because they know the customer well, they have the data around it, they can even provide potentially better pricing and better lending to them because they know the customers. So the value proposition is really huge, and the opportunity for those type of platforms is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amazon probably being my favorite example, in that they've been providing embedded finance for years with the lending that they do to the suppliers that are on their platform. And they've got an excellent view into their product flow and what people are buying from them and how quickly they're being paid. So all of that allows you to offer this smart lending service that no bank could probably provide themselves. Just because they don't have access to the data, they
100%.
don't have the data. But when you enable your customers when you empower your customers to leverage their own data in providing financial services, that is where it gets significant potential. Just shifting gears a bit. When you and I first met, when we did the FinTech Insider podcast for 11FS in 2017, and again a few months after that, in early 2018, we met again. I think it was one of the 11FS events. I remember you had completed a coaching course and you had spoken fanatically about it at that time. Has that stayed with you? And has that coaching mindset helped you over the last 3+ years since we met?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has made on one side, my managing style, trying to not give the answer always, trying to let people learn by themselves, to have more long-lasting results than taking the shortcuts. Shortcut is okay, but sometimes, like, if you want to help people grow, and this is like, I see it as your duty as a manager, right? You need to let them do their own mistakes and ask the right questions, right? So the mindset has stayed for this part, and of course for the companies that I am supporting on the side, because I think it's such a powerful approach, right? I think the mix in between coaching and mentorship is important. I don't think you can always be a coach, because there are some information that would be so painful and so long for some companies to get, specifically on regulatory stuff. And I mean, like when it took you 10 years to learn a lesson, like it's sometimes like quite good to share it without letting people go through the whole process. But on the other side, sometimes it's more beneficial to actually let people go through the path, but guide them through the path. And it's what coaching is about. So yes, it has absolutely stayed with me. I'm not doing that as a side activity. I'm using it as a tool on my day-to-day activities and my also side hustles.
Yeah. I know. And you know, having that chat with you, and then also Paul Smith, who runs a coaching business here, Possible.ie, runs it in Ireland. And I've known Paul for years. We're friends. And, you know, they were sponsors of this podcast for a while with his recruitment business. And, you know, just getting to know him really well and having that chat with you initially about it and about the importance of asking questions rather than making statements. When you're a coach, you're using questions to draw out and have the individual frame these as their own ideas rather than your ideas. But as a mentor, you're generally kind of giving advice and doing some light coaching. But I tried, you know, with inspiration from you and from Paul, to shift into coaching mode with someone who I always gave the answers to. And this was just a couple of years ago. It was so hard. It's draining just to ask questions and to frame everything that you think you're about to say, frame that as a question. It's like playing Jeopardy. Right? I don't know if you've ever seen that game show Jeopardy, where you need to answer every question in the form of answer every whatever it is, right? I can't even say it. It's that hard. It's that much of a tongue twister. But it worked, right? And eventually that individual came around and said, oh, okay, I see where you're going with this. I tried it again a couple months later, and it was just so out of character for me that the person said, who have you been talking to? How do you know this about me? You're making these accusations. I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. I'm just trying this new way of trying to help you. So it's, I think it's something that, you know, no one should try to become a Jedi without proper Jedi training. Otherwise, it's just dangerous, you know, is what I've kind of.
I love it. Right? That's quite funny, and I have to say it's out of character to me as well. I think you can mix it up. It's just you can alternate in the conversation, right? It depends on the topic. If you think, oh, they should really learn that by themselves, you can, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, listen, I know you've got a few more things going on, obviously beyond OpenPayd. You've got the Beyond FinTech podcast. You're a FinTech Advisory Board member at PayU. You're an investigator for the FinTech stream at the Said Business School at Oxford, and also a contributing writer in Forbes. How do all of those activities help you to execute at the highest level, as you're known for?
They feed me, and that's the reason why I will never stop them. And that's the reason why it's a total part of me and my job and my evolution. And as much as side hustles they can look, beyond FinTech enables me to actually learn from people that are much more expert in their field than me. I had you with like the growth wheel. I had Florian on InsurTech and embedded insurance. I had Simon Torrance on how to transform your business model, all that kind of thing. You're tapping into the expertise of people that have more than 20 years experience into that. So it's just like a great learning course. So I love that. The fintech investigator role at Oxford really enables me to see the innovation in fintech, what's coming up, giving me new ideas for my business, right? New things we should look into, learn about new suppliers I'm not aware of, like new ways of thinking. Also, like sometimes you have younger people that also can teach you stuff, because they just don't think the same. So I really like that. PayU, it's a whole other level. I mean, because the level of the execution of this company is just crazy. The CEO and the team and the advisory board teach me stuff all the time. I'm sharing what I have learned at Fidor in the neobanking world, in the payments world, but I just feel that during those sessions, I'm learning as much as they learn from me. And that's the reason why, I of course need to prioritize, and this is what I am committing to right now. But without that, I just feel I would be less creative and less up to date with the market. Because when you are in your day-to-day, you are deep down into your operations and you just don't take the time to sit back and think. And all those tools enabled me to at least take this little time to sit back and think.
Yeah, I gotcha. Getting that creative headspace really does help. Speaking of prioritizing, obviously, I know that you're a mother and that you've managed to somehow balance your career with the joy and demands of being a mom. So thinking about the post-COVID landscape, and hopefully we're there soon enough, fingers crossed, do you think that balancing act is going to become easier or harder to do? Or was that flexibility already built into the pre-COVID startup work-life balance compared to the corporate side? So do you think it's going to become easier or harder to do this when you're a parent?
I have a mixed answer on this one, and I will share my experience. I'm sorry, I'm not a black and white person.
That's fine.
Before COVID, I needed to travel every week, which makes the balance complicated. I mean, I have fund arrangements and I have so much help at home that makes it work. But the travel makes things more complicated because it was 3 days a week in London. And as you know, I live in Bordeaux. I was, however, very efficient, back to back from 8 to 8, sometimes even 7:30 to 8, doing all my meetings, being fully available on Mondays and Fridays for my work, but my girls as well. So, and post-COVID, working from home, I think it's everybody has felt that is putting the boundary when work finishes and when your life starts, right? And because you can stay much easily in front of your computer and not being present and things like that. So that's the reason why the answer is so mixed for me, because I need to travel less, but I have more difficulty switching off. Now I am committing definitely to my girls and my family to be present, and that's the way I handle it. It's like in the morning I do my meditation and I do my sports before I start, and at night I am present with the girls from around 6:30 to 7:30, so being here for bath time and food. And after that, if I need to rework, I rework because it's what it is. But I still struggle to finish work between 6 and 6:30, because when you're caught in your day-to-day activities, so what I have started doing essentially is to put in place the list of stuff that I need to do the day after and try to close, even if I'm in the middle of something, do I really need to finish it or not, essentially.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I've just recently picked up mindfulness and meditation as part of a coaching course that I'm doing. And the little tricks to shut your brain off, whether that's before you go to bed or in the middle of the night, with regards to how you're doing this and how you're pulling it all off, it sounds like that regardless of whatever the situation in the world is, if you're a parent and you're committed to providing for your kids and doing so in the best possible way, it doesn't matter what obstacles are there or not there, you're still going to do the best you can. So
you have no choice. I mean, that's or I feel I have no choice because I have made the conscious decisions of having kids is to take care of them, right? And I have made the conscious decision of having a husband is also to see him sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. Yeah, my wife and I are finally getting out to our local neighborhood restaurant for the first time coming up. Things are reopened here now. Thank God. I hear you. I hear you. Looking at the last couple of questions that I'm going to ask you, Sophie, after hearing this morning, I was listening to a podcast where a couple of folks in the US, Seth Levine and Elizabeth McBride, were talking about the focus on tech entrepreneurs versus non-tech entrepreneurs and where the money is going in the US in particular. On that note, is there a non-tech entrepreneur that you've been particularly impressed with?
Yes, absolutely. So what I was thinking about it, and I wanted to actually discuss Tech for Good. And one of the organizations that has been doing great and which has been launched by Leila Hobala is Make Sense. And it's an organization that really is putting people together to enable the launch of initiatives for the greater good of the humanity. So it can be help some entrepreneurs wherever they are in the world to be entrepreneurs when they don't have access to the resource to learn the basic about it. It can be launching new initiatives to help people getting to access to water or things like that. So
Wow.
I really, it's an organization that is around 10 years old and that has been spreading across the world. They have been able to create like local chapters and really have an impact on people's lives. So I think it's worth mentioning.
Awesome. Well, listen, last question for you today, Sophie. Tell us, is there one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about you?
So we have covered the fact that I like to take jobs that I have no clue how to do before I tell them.
I've always believed in that. Always go for jobs you're totally unqualified for.
So that's the first part. No, so like since you know that already, I would say that I have done boxing competition during my youth for 8 years.
And boxing competition.
Yeah.
I actually, I'm not surprised to hear that, Sophie. And how did that come about?
I think, it just reflects my personality. I have always liked to do stuff that I'm not supposed to do or that are too tough to do or... So like it's
Okay.
my whole path has been like that. And so I heard a guy mentioning was doing boxing and I was just like, that sounds great. Let me go do that. And my mom was just like, oh my God, Sophie, what are you doing? And I just enjoyed it so much that I spent 8 years doing it. And I was like, I was doing a competition. So like,
How old were you when you started?
I was 14.
Okay, there you go. And then you were at the top of your game and you retired.
Exactly. Like during uni, essentially. Like I moved to Montreal, like I took it back, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, Sophie, it's been so amazing to speak with you on all of this today and your entire journey across fintech, across embedded finance, boxing, being a mom, and the impact that folks with the right mindset can have on the world. So thank you. Really appreciate you coming on for this chat and looking forward to having more chats with you in the future as well.
Likewise, Pete. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That does it for this week, folks. A big thanks to Sophie Guibaud for opening up her mind to help us figure out why she does what she does. Links to get in touch with Sophie and learn more about OpenPayd are on our website at moneyneversleeps.ie. So check us out online and subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter as well. If you like what you heard, we would sincerely appreciate a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening on, as it helps others to find the show. And remember, Money Never Sleeps is spelled as all one word. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm the founding partner at Norio Ventures, and I'm an early-stage startup advisor and investor helping fintech and digital asset startups get their product to market, build traction with customers, and raise funding. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, get in touch at pete@norioventures.com. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.